Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to our June Neighborhood Housing and Development Subcommittee meeting. Thank you all for joining us for today's meeting. I think it will be a good meeting, but first we start with a sad note. We lost a longtime community leader, Georgie Good, passionate advocate for the people this subcommittee serves, as well as the entire city, and educator, spouse to one of our community leaders, and with Councilman Good's permission, wanted to ask if we could do a moment of silence for Georgie Good.
Proceed.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you all for that moment of quiet reflection, and we look forward to celebrating her many gifts to Phoenix in the time period to come. And unless any of my colleagues had comments.
Mr. Good, my condolences, but we know she went home, and we will celebrate her here. And she has left a strong legacy.
And I feel she's with me today.
She is.
Thank you. Any other comments, or shall we move to the minutes of the May 19th subcommittee meeting?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Minutes pass unanimously. We do have a consent agenda today. No presentations are planned, but staff is available for questions. We are moving forward on maintenance improvement districts and Operation Patch and Paint. Would entertain a motion on the consent agenda unless anyone would like presentations.
I move items 3 and 4.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. A good forward motion to make sure that we can maintain safe communities and work on redevelopment. Now we move to item 5, the Walkable Urban Code. And this is an item we also heard at our last subcommittee meeting. So welcome, Planning Director Alan Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Ms. Hoffman and I will do a brief presentation, and then we're happy to answer questions. And we know there's a number of community folks who wish to speak on this issue as well. As you guys are all aware, this is part of our Reinvent Phoenix project, which is a $2.9 million grant from HUD to do planning around our transit districts. There are 5 of them that have went through the subcommittee over the last couple of months to be approved by council. The item before you is our Walkable Urban Code, which is one of the implementation mechanisms of those transit district plans. So you see on the map before you the areas in color are the transit district planning areas. The black dotted lines are where the TOD1 overlay and TOD2 zoning overlay exists today. Those have special zoning requirements that try and promote walkable development based upon what was adopted in City Council in the early 2000s. The Walkable Urban Code will replace those zonings and try and expand it as we get property owner participation, but that won't come forward until probably August at the earliest in some of the areas starting over in the Gateway District, and then working its way up around the light rail line up into the Solano District area, probably in 2016 by the time we work with all the owners and the community groups to make that happen there. So at this point, the only action on the agenda today will place the Walkable Urban Code in the zoning ordinance as text that someone could apply into. It won't effectively change anyone's zoning until we take those further council actions. As it's gone through the process, it was approved by the Central City Village Planning Committee with modifications, approved by Alhambra and Encanto per staff recommendations, as well as the Camelback East Village Planning Committee. The Design Standards Committee heard it after all of those villages. They made some changes and then brought that forward to the Planning Commission, and that was approved at the Planning Commission. Now I'm going to turn over to Ms. Hoffman to kind of walk us through some of the details.
Great. Good morning, Madam Chair, subcommittee members. The
image on the screen is basically showing you what we have. It's very similar to what we have in the downtown code. Each of the transect districts in the walkable urban code has specific setbacks, build-tos, amount of sidewalk areas, and as well as the uses that are allowed in each transect district. So what staff have included in the walkable urban code is flexibility. And the flexibility we have in there is similar to what we already have in the downtown code. We want to have 25% flexibility for the staff to address real-world challenges. So if there's something out there when somebody's doing one specific project that they can't meet a certain dimension for a standard, then staff have ability to work with that applicant to address that one thing that is, again, a real-world challenge that already exists. And that gives us some flexibility to be able to do that. And we already have this in the downtown code. Staff will have to document this on the site plan, and they'll have to have rationale as to why they are allowing the break that they may be providing to the project. If anybody would like to have more than that 25% flexibility, they will need to go to the Design Review Committee. So the Design Review Committee and the staff cannot modify uses or heights, but the Design Review Committee has up to 35% flexibility. Again, an applicant has to give rationale as to why they need this to be able to support that proposal. So the maximum amount that you can have changed is 35%. So one example we have, this is actually the downtown code area, and it's along 3rd Street, and their required setback along 3rd Street is at least 5 feet. Well, they have a design that you can see a little bit better here, where their stoop doorwell, because of the angle of the street, encroaches into that 5-foot setback. So in this instance, staff were able to address that by having up to 15-inch change in encroachments into that setback. And with that, the applicant didn't have to go get a variance, go through that process. And yet we feel that it provided flexibility enough to create a solution and an ability to do a really quality design for a project. So our schedule is that we hope to go to the City Council on July the 1st, and after City Council approval, staff will still have quite a bit of work to do analysis on the entitlements for each of the properties along the light rail and come back with proposals as to where we would like to move forward with possibly rezoning to the walkable urban code. There will be a lot of outreach to neighborhoods, businesses, property owners, and others who are interested in understanding what we're doing as we move forward with proposing where the walkable urban code will actually be placed from the staff-initiated rezoning process. So what we recommend is, would the subcommittee please approve the City Council approval of the walkable urban code as recommended by the Planning Commission and with the revisions as summarized in your City Council report. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll go to cards first. And we have the pleasure of being joined by 2 alumni of the Phoenix City Council, Councilman Calvin Good and Councilman Craig Tripkin. So thank you for joining us today. And we will start with Councilman Calvin Good, who's marked opposed.
With your permission, I'd like to share with members of this committee how this will affect Eastlake Park Association. I have lived in this area for 60 years. And if you look at what I've shared with you, you can see how it really tears our community apart. To think of a 100-story building, 100-foot building in that community. And if you look at it very carefully, I do have a couple of houses in the area, and certainly on a personal note, I'm opposed to this kind of height that to me destroys an old African-American community. I don't know whether you have some questions. Certainly staff has come up with their recommendation, but I think this will tell exactly how this is going to affect us in our community. And we are East Lake Park Association has not taken a vote on this, and even though I've asked them to, but certainly in terms of talking with people in the community, they certainly concur with me that that this is something that really destroys our neighborhood. Are there any questions you might have of Mrs. Lockhart is here, and our president is here, and if you have any questions of me, certainly we're prepared to answer them.
Well, I could ask a simple question. Mr. Good, thank you for coming today, too. My understanding is we're dealing with the walkable urban code this morning, but this doesn't involve anything dealing with height or density of the project that you're talking about. Is it different from what this is, or?
I think the walkable code does include this area, does it not?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm indicating to you how it would affect our particular area from 7th Street to 18th Street and from south of Van Buren.
But the aspects, I'm just trying to ask the question here, the aspects of the code don't change the height. It doesn't involve in what the height would be. Is there anything in there? Maybe I could ask staff of how to address that. I mean, there's a specific concern Mr. Good has on a project coming right next to him. But how would that walkable urban code have an impact?
So, Chairman Gallego, Councilman DeCiccio, the walkable urban code, as before you today, does not change anyone's zoning of any of these parcels as shown on the map that Mr. Good handed out. What it does do is put into place a chapter in the zoning ordinance that starting in the future, starting in August and then working forward through 2016, we'll be working with property owners and neighborhood groups to map the zoning at that point, and that's when it would change people's zoning entitlements. What staff would use as a guide in that is the policy plan that was adopted here by City Council that shows these different transect zones. So that is where we would start the discussion with the community, because this is what City Council adopted policy says related to height and intensity of those parcels.
But the walkable urban code does not change that. That is something that was already decided upon.
It was something that was already decided as part of the adoption of the East Lake Garfield plan.
Wonderful.
Are there any other questions in regards to this? I think it's indicating to the developers, and we do have an applicant now who is coming through the process to build a 100-foot building on the corner of 12th Street and East Washington. So it does signal that this is what is going to happen in the future. And it's our feeling that we need to deal with this situation at this level. And certainly you on the committee there certainly can help us to keep this neighborhood, because we feel very strongly that it really decimates our community. And if you look at it, I noticed that they left out my particular home at 1508 East Jefferson Street, but I do have two houses in that area that would be affected. And what I'm saying to you is this certainly signal to staff, and they have, in my understanding, gone out and talked to developers who are already bringing projects to us. And you'll probably hear about one today of 100 feet. So it does have some impact today, and it doesn't mean that nothing will happen, that this is sort of advisory. What you put into, what you prove today will be to signal to staff and to the developers that they can come in and push us out literally between 7th Street and 18th Street, south of Van Buren. Any questions?
My question is to Alan. So if we approve this today, what I'm hearing from Mr. Good is that, or I'm hearing two different things. So I'm hearing that we've already passed the East Lake adopted the code, the different heights in the codes and items like that.
Councilwoman Gallego and Pastor, yes, we adopted the TOD plan,
Okay.
which is what this map is from that Councilman Good handed out.
So this has already been adopted.
Correct.
And then the WU code will put into place, and that's the question, what will the WU code now put into place with the TOD?
So the WU code will put a chapter into the zoning ordinance that will provide the legal zoning regulations for these different transect districts. Later down the road, starting in August, we will actually work with all of the property owners and the residents about changing the actual zoning to map these different transect districts per the zoning maps, and then change their zoning to be consistent with what's in the walkable urban code. So Councilman Good is right from the standpoint of we are setting up a framework that shows this is the height we, the public, desire here, but it's not yet set in stone. That still has to be a discussion we'll have with the property owners and the community when we change their zoning.
So if a property owner chooses not to change their zoning, do they have that choice?
So they could certainly opt out and say they don't wish to participate in this. That is something that staff will have to evaluate and take to council. We hope to convince them that they should participate because we want to increase light rail ridership, we want to increase walkability, but they don't have to do that. Certainly, the Planning Commission and City Council could ultimately bring a case forward that would mandate them, but that's something that we would try and avoid if at all possible.
And will the Central City Village Planning Commission be involved in this?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, certainly in respect to the information just provided to you, I think it signals, and as indicated, staff has already gone out and tell developers to submit. And you hear about one a little later about a request on the 12th Street and East Washington to come up with a 100-foot building. And I think and they have already, according to some of the developers, have been told that this will come about in the future. So what we're trying to do is establish some parameters here now that this community will have something to say about the height of buildings in the community that literally destroys the residential area. Any other questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate and hope that you will support the community.
Patrick Panetta, marked in favor.
Good morning, Councilwoman Gallego, Subcommittee. I just wanted to speak on behalf of the American Institute of Architects, the local Phoenix chapter. We have been a partner with the City of Phoenix in the review and development of this process and of this text addition to the code. And we specifically support the text as recommended by staff, and specifically the component that allows staff flexibility to interpret the code within a certain tolerance. It helps streamline the process, it helps going to variance hearings, and it helps keep costs down for development and good design. So we'd like to support the code as recommended. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Billy Shields, followed by Larry Lazarus.
Chairwoman Gallego and council members, I spoke, Billy Shields, 11 West Jefferson, Lure City Center. I put a lot of comments on the record last month, haven't changed, support this as written. Staff has gone out and worked extensively with community groups, and I'm a member of the Phoenix Community Alliance Central City Subcommittee. They've worked with us, modified this based on some of our recommendations and didn't take some of the others. And so we really are pleased with the proposal and just want to recommend it. Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who's been involved in this development, this process. Larry Lazarus, followed by Sean Sweat.
Yeah, for the record, my name is Larry Lazarus. My office is at 420 West Roosevelt, Phoenix. First of all, I would like to express my condolences to Calvin Good. His wife did some wonderful things, as did he, throughout the city over many, many years. And I think we all have thanks to give to the family. However, I'm going to be speaking about that particular issue that he was talking about, which is height. The Transect 5, which is the area that he's talking about, is a high-density transect area for the light rail. There's no single-family development directly around it. And we are working, and I don't want to talk about the zoning case. I do want to tell you that we are working with East Lake Park, the Village Planning Committee, and the neighborhood, and will continue to do so. And the City Council will have an opportunity to review and make a decision on that particular case. Remember, what the code says and what's before you now says a maximum of 100 feet. It doesn't mandate 100 feet. So there's all kinds of room for continued discussion. What we're trying to achieve around these light rail stations is density. The density tries to facilitate a walkable environment, to wean ourselves away from the automobile, to facilitate mass transit, and to maximize and move away from sprawl development to inward development. We want to maximize that opportunity. At the same time, we don't want to affect existing residential, especially single family, around the area. So we want to create a footage here that has to be measured on a case-by-case basis, which makes a determination on the compatibility in the neighborhood, on blocking significant view corridors, and building massing that would be inappropriate for the city. We still have to have that discussion. It still has to be determined within the discussion as it relates to particular zoning cases. But I think we will have that opportunity, and we will be able to take a look at offsetting and balancing those two issues, intensity versus significant effect to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean Sweat.
Thank you very much. My name is Sean Sweat, 100 East Fillmore Street, number 230 in Phoenix. So I just want to say that I support the WU Code. I think the content in the WU Code is excellent. Personally, I would make a couple changes, but I think it's really good, and I think we should adopt it. But I have a concern with a particular section of it, which is a significant concern, and that's with giving the variances through the staff process, because it doesn't offer any transparency to the public. This is in section 13 of the code, so it's at the very end. What this applies to is both the 25% variance component as well as the frontage types, right? So it's more than just the 25% that we see up on the screen. It's also the frontage types, which there are a list of frontage types in the code that are approved. And what this section 13 would do is it'll allow staff to allow any frontage type without any public input. And that's a concern, because we have frontage types which have gone through this transparent process of creating the WU Code, and there's been a lot of outreach for that. But I'm afraid that we're now going to back into a situation where we've created through transparency a wonderful code, and now we're going to implement without it, with lots of variance capabilities, without any transparency, which kind of gets away from the whole point of what we're trying to do, which is a transparent, community-driven process with community input, with a code that people know what to expect. When we start allowing staff flexibility without any public input, we no longer know what to expect, and we don't know what's coming because we have no visibility to it. So the existing zoning requires that all variances go through a public hearing. That's the existing zoning. This will change that to mean that many variances no longer need zoning adjustment hearings. And zoning adjustment hearings are how the community knows about these requests. We do not learn about things through site plans. That is in the weeds. It is really hard to go dig through site plans, see what's happening. You don't even know till it's stamped, and then it's a done deal if there's a change coming. If the community has concerns, we can voice them at public hearings. Doesn't mean it's going to go our way, but we can at least voice them. And if they don't, then the hearing is very quick. This section gives developers the right to appeal. I want to make that point too. This gives developers the right to appeal any decision staff makes, but it does not give the community any right to appeal. And that's if, by some miracle, the community even learns there's something that needs to be challenged. The community has no way to appeal that decision in this code, but developers do. And so and we can't even have a public discussion about it. So this is a one-sided section. Section 13 is a one-sided section with no transparency, and I think it undermines the good faith that the WU Code was developed in. I mean, Kurt Upton spent a lot of time doing lots of outreach, and it was a very transparent process, and this would undermine all of that work if we allow this to happen where community has no way to see what's happening, community has no way to appeal if they need to challenge it, but developers have all the visibility and have all the rights to appeal. And that's challenging to me. So again, this includes both the 25% variance component as well as the frontage types. And so I'm asking not that we remove the flexibility, I'm just asking that we put it through a public process, whether that's through zoning adjustment hearings or the design review committee. Either one's a public process, either one's fine. But we just put it through a public process so the community has visibility, and so this is a transparent code. But other than section 13, I approve. Thank you.
Councilwoman Pastor?
My question is about the community to appeal. So is there ability for the community to appeal?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, as the zoning ordinance is written today, a property owner has the ability to appeal if there is a decision made by the city and they're an aggrieved property owner. We don't have an appeal system set up for neighboring property owners who disagree with staff decision. We'll sit down and talk with them. They are invited to a preliminary meeting where we talk about site plan and we make any of those decisions. The public can attend those meetings and we can take input as part of that. But there's no formal appeal process for that. And that's because the way that appeals are set up, if you are a property owner and you don't disagree with the decision staff has made, you have the right to say, staff, I disagree with that, just like someone has a right to go to court and say, I disagree with the speeding ticket the police gave me, and they can challenge that through the courts. There's not a system where neighbors who thought they saw someone speeding can challenge that type of decision.
Let me think about that right now. Okay.
Can I mention something as well, too, on the flexibility part? I think that's critical with anything that you do. I mean, if you look at the center city in particular, and this is not just in the city of Phoenix, it's in other cities throughout the entire country. They're older, they have more complex problems, they have easements that may completely prohibit anybody from getting anything done. By giving that type of flexibility to staff, and that's done throughout our entire code. It's not just this. I mean, throughout our entire code in the city of Phoenix, you have to have some flexibility built into it. By saying we want it to go through the other process, you're basically saying you don't want any flexibility. So, I mean, really, it's either or by saying that. And I totally get the discussion and the debate on it. But if you do that, you will literally get into a situation where individuals will never have the ability to get things done in a timely manner, because speed to market matters when you get projects going. And there are other things that will occur. You'll end up getting and driving businesses out of an area if they feel that there's absolutely no flexibility. So it's not the process part of it. It's just that this is ingrained in throughout our entire code in the city of Phoenix, always giving people the ability and the flexibility to challenge and say, well, we really don't agree with that, staff, and here's why. You know, and allow staff to make that determination. It's been within our system since the beginning of time, I think.
Councilmember, members of the subcommittee, I would add that in our traditional design guidelines that are throughout the city, there's no 25% limit on staff flexibility. So there is presumptions, and those get appealed through an internal review process for the most part too. And there's no 25% limit. In some instances, some of those design guidelines, as Mr. Sweat mentioned, do rise up to variance, but there's a vast majority of them that don't rise to that level, and there's no flexibility related to those design guidelines. They have to show staff how they're meeting the intent of the design guideline, but staff isn't limited by 25%. For example, within the baseline area overlay, there are presumptions about one-story heights along the canal, and so someone can, of single-family homes, someone can come in and say, well, I'm not going to meet the presumption of every other single-family home What I am going to do is have a significant open space, and then I'll have adjacent to the canal, and then I'll have, every second home that is one story. And so staff would use that flexibility to say, yes, that's meeting the intent. If you look at the linear footage along the canal, they're achieving the same impact, which is not to have a bunch of 2 stories that back up to the canal. So that's an example of how staff uses that flexibility throughout the city where there's no 25% limit.
Okay, so I think we're hearing, and from our chairwoman of the Transparency Committee, definitely, the public definitely cares about their neighborhoods and wants to be involved. Is there an opportunity anyway to sort of make sure communities like Eastlake have that seat at the table in any way?
So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, certainly related to the Eastlake issue, if the subcommittee would like, we're happy to sit down and talk with them directly about the mapping and the heights prior to coming forward with a zoning case that will change the individual property zoning in there, to have a specific discussion related to heights with them in that area. And then the other thing that I would suggest is that maybe staff can have a yearly review with the subcommittee where we come back and report on how that flexibility was used. So we'd be able to say, here's what staff did. The subcommittee could then look at that flexibility and along with any other provisions in the walkable urban code that may or may not be working, we can kind of use that as a review time and then make any other suggested changes out of that as we have that review.
Okay, that certainly sounds like something I think would be responsive to what we've heard from the community here today. So I think when it comes time for a motion, and we still have more cards,
okay,
but that we might want to include that review and that additional conversation with the communities such as Eastlake.
Okay, thank you.
Linda Pollock. Marked in favor.
Thank you. I'm Linda Pollock from the Windsor Square Historic District. And the district supports the adoption of the Walkable Urban Code. I'm here simply to thank Sandra Hoffman, Vanya Fletcher, and their staff for supporting our concerns about the draft as was presented to us. The code not only reduced the height around our historic districts from 4 stories to 2 based on our concerns, but when we addressed or brought forward further concerns about the lack of unnecessarily intrusive commercial uses that the current zoning ordinance had, that the Walkable Urban Code lacked, we were received very courteously by Ms. Hoffman and Ms. Fletcher. They rewrote the provisions back into the code, and we're completely satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you. Jarrett Maupin. Marked opposed.
To the chair and members of the subcommittee. My concern, and the councilwoman, my councilwoman spoke to it, is the ability of the neighborhoods to remain in existence as this path of and style of development comes into place. On the card, I wrote down an address of a property that my family owns, 1412 East Jefferson. It's a 2-story Victorian home built in 1898. Used to be home to Governor Hunt, and then a principal of a couple of the local schools over there, right across from Pilgrim Rest and Eastlake Park. It's a different kind of neighborhood, and I think the city should take a look at not just Eastlake, but the entire Booker T. Washington redevelopment area. When my grandmother worked for the city, she was the director of that. It was one of the first federally funded redevelopment projects in the city. And they did have some interesting developments. Washington Manor was built, a 3-story building, senior housing. Some other developments happened, some historic preservation, but the mission of the city at that time, and Booker T. Washington redevelopment ran from, I believe, 7th Street to 16th Street, from Jackson to Van Buren, I think maybe the north side of Van Buren, if I remember the map correctly. And the idea was to pair new development with single-family homes. My house is, again, one of the houses that's not highlighted on the map. It's a white square in between 2
I think red squares that indicate 100 feet. I think it would be very odd to see that house sandwiched between two very, very tall apartment buildings. But development questions aside, I think the city runs into trouble when they don't look at their pre-existing plans and the new vision that folks have for the community. You should go back, take a look at the vision and the promise that was in the Booker T. Washington Redevelopment Area Plan. That came about in the 60s. Started development in the 70s and the 80s. I don't think you finished everything that was necessarily promised to that community over there, and that happens. But there were certain, I think, guarantees or a commitment between the city and the families that live there to maintain their style of living. I think walkability is a very, very serious issue. We have that issue here in the downtown core. We're the only major city in America I know that builds tall and has nothing on the first or second floor. No delis, no shops, no anything. So we have the lesson to learn downtown. But in that particular area, it's more than just Eastlake. And I think people lose sight of that. There's a substantial amount of single-family housing. If you walk down Adams Street and Monroe, any of the streets there. Madison, there's substantial housing left on Madison too. I think you need to keep that in mind. I mean, the Torres family, they've got a whole cul-de-sac over there. So we just want to make sure that things happen and it's a good mix and a good blend. And that can happen. We can stop gentrification and other negative things by looking at the plan that the city had before, that Booker T. Washington Redevelopment Area Plan. I think that's one of your first NDP projects. And then match it to what you're doing now and see if we can't find some common ground or some consensus on things. But it's being counted out, and having those initial plans discounted that I think is giving folks cause for concern in the neighborhood.
Thank you. We have a card from Dan Clockey, available to speak. Not needed. Reginald Walton, marked opposed.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. I stand opposed because I have some concerns. I served as the vice chair for the Eastlake Garfield Transit District, and what we approved and what went to the Central City Village Planning Committee and then what came before City Council were three different things. We asked for certain things to be done by staff. Staff made changes and did not communicate with us. And so we have concerns that staff was telling developers, Mr. Lazarus in particular, that there was a foot limit when we had agreed about stories. And then I come today and I hear other neighborhoods that have stories in their plan, but we're dealing with feet. I have serious issues about that, because what that lets me know is that it's not a consistent effort, and that it seems to me that there are some, how can I be nice about this? There are some inconsistencies, if you will, between what's being told to some groups and what's being told to us. And so therefore, with that being said, I cannot stand in good conscience before this body in support of it, even though I was part of the plan. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for your service in the development. And you spoke at our last subcommittee meeting about feet versus stories, and if you could speak to the, well, if you could just speak to.
Sure, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. As staff was working on the transit station area plans, staff talked about height in terms of stories. That's why the map you see before you has Transit District 5.5 and those different numbers, because staff was using stories to get people to visualize height. As part of developing the walkable urban code, we had to refine those stories more, because state law allows the city to use its zoning authority to regulate the bulk of buildings in terms of height, setbacks. It doesn't really allow for regulations of story heights in between different ones, so it allows for that larger bulk. So as part of developing the walkable urban code, staff translated the stories into feet. And so that's where throughout the walkable urban code, in every one of the transit districts, we use feet. In the transit district plans, all of them use stories. So it is consistent in that regard of all the different transit district plans all have stories, and in the walkable urban code, it's all feet. So there's no difference in one transit district plan versus another transit district plan. We were consistent in how we did it. The difference is when visualizing things with the larger public and talking about what do you see for preferences, we use stories because that's easy for people to visualize than the actual height.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Tom Hester, available to speak if requested. Would you? All right. Don Kuth, marked in favor. Tom McKinley, marked in favor, available to speak if requested. Marcy Rosenberg, in favor. Shannon Scutari, in favor. And Sylvia Rusha, marked in favor. Would anyone else like to fill out a card? Not, we'll turn it to colleagues for final questions. And have we lost Councilman Valenzuela? Okay. Do you have any additional questions?
No, I think I covered them all. Again, mine dealt mostly with the flexibility part of the code. I think it's critical to have that in there. Mm-hmm. It really is. I mean, to not have any flexibility, I think, becomes problematic for anybody. You know, the city of Phoenix has done so much in trying to get things going in the downtown area. Started with, you know, basically many years ago. And this is all just part of that, just giving the flexibility to take those specific situations where there are, it just can't, nothing can be done unless you give staff some room to make it work.
Wonderful. I think flexibility is important, but we've heard very strongly from the community that they live in these neighborhoods, they know things about these neighborhoods that we don't all know, and that they need a seat at the table. So hopefully we can strike a balance. Any additional questions?
I do. So Alan, we take a vote here. We still have room to make changes until it gets to the final council.
Chairman Gallego, Councilman Pastor, yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. For transparency's sake, I'm going to go back to transparency in the fact that I understand that the owner has the ability to appeal if the property owner doesn't agree with what's going on or happening. More than likely, the property owner is agreeing because they're in the middle of doing it. My whole thing is really about the preservation and voice of people around where whatever the property is being built, and having a voice and being able to be heard, and having a dialogue. You and I have gone through this for the last year and a half, in the sense of any of these type of items that come in front of me, I go back out to the neighborhood and I work very closely with the neighborhood along with you and the staff to get to that middle ground. And so I just want to be comfortable enough to know that throughout all this, we're able to get to that middle ground. And there is a voice. And so I see that there is, but I do want to add some more items on here. And I can make a motion, and then from there we can go. I move to approve, per the staff report recommendation, the following modifications. Staff shall bring the WU code back to NHD subcommittee within 12 months of the mapping the code to present on the 20% staff flexibility provision that it is used, as well as any other walkable urban code provision. After that, the code shall be brought back for an annual review to the appropriate subcommittee. I have some changes, some language changes in section 1313. Point D.1 shall add the words landscaping, parking, glazing, and blank wall treatments at the end of the sentence. This corrects the oversight and gives the DRC the same flexibility as the staff. It was in an earlier version of the code, but due to the typographical error, it was left out. So that's 13. I don't know if all you guys have your books, but 1313.D.1. And
what's that part again? Because in here it has 35%.
Yeah, it's just clarifying some language that was left off in this last draft that was in earlier versions, and it was incorrectly left off.
And that all document references to staff flexibility shall be changed from a maximum of 25% to 20%. And then finally, to modify section 1305 to change the minimum stoop door well area to 24 square feet from 36 square feet due to the feedback from the public. Those are all my modifications.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
And that's the motion.
Yes, with all those modifications.
I'll second the motion. I agree that there needs to be a compromise and a balance. And that's it. I would second the motion.
And we'll reflect in the minutes the additional outreach that staff has committed to, particularly with the East Lake community. Does that need to be in the motion, or we are committed and it'll be in the minutes?
We'll go ahead and add it to the motion just so it's clear that prior to coming back on the mapping, staff will meet with East Lake community and talk with them and the property owners as well.
Wonderful. That's okay with both
That's
the
fine
maker
with
and the
me.
seconder? Thank you. I think that's.
I just think that should just be part of the process, regardless if it's East Lake or Windsor or St. Francis.
It will be part of the process, but we'll just make some extra effort here because we know there's some concerns within the community about how it was done, to have some meetings so that we can get all the different groups together, because there is some discrepancy amongst some who support the 100 feet in height and others who don't. So we'll get everyone together and talk about it.
And if I could too, I'd like to be briefed on it more, because I've heard this at the last meeting too. If you could just come and meet with me on it. I'd like to get the idea of what it is, you know, what some groups are supporting, what some groups are not supporting, and what that does with the final public process too. Because my understanding is that that still has a whole public process that it needs to go through. Is that correct?
Councilman Gallego and Councilman Cicillo, yes, that's correct.
For a zoning process. Yeah, and I'd like to, if I could, meet with some of the community members too. They'd be willing to come meet with me and let me know their concerns.
And it just, for me, just listening, it sounds like communication. There's some disconnect happening. And what I mean by that, in the sense of I'm going to the stories and feet and to the height. And if we can just be consistent throughout it. I know that the transit, the TDBP was dealing with, was it feet? Or am I getting?
Stories.
Stories.
In the plan.
And so there's so many things moving through the city right now because it's happening within District 4 and different plans are moving. So sometimes when 3 or 4 plans are going through the city, language then becomes imperative in the sense of consistency. Because we're using stories in one piece and looking at it as individual, but then in another piece, we're getting to the technical area of the feet and height and everything else. And so I think we have to just demonstrate, okay, this would be the stories, this is what it is, and this is what it looks like. The language, I think that's where the confusion is happening.
Thank you, Councilwoman Pastor. We'll make sure to use feet from here on out.
Okay,
make it clear.
thank you.
State legislature getting involved and complicating everything. Wonderful. With that, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. So thank you to Councilwoman Pastor for her leadership on this issue, and to all of my colleagues. We have item number 6 scheduled next, but it is my understanding that there are more people here for item number 7. So would it be the preference of the committee to take that out of order? Okay. And I believe we can take item 7 without a motion and just. Thank you. We welcome our housing director for his grand finale meeting. So thank you to Carl, and congratulations on your retirement. And thank you for your service to our residents, particularly those who are most at risk.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. And I'm glad this is actually the issue that I get to talk to you about as part of my last presentation, because it is significant to what we do in housing and significant to our residents here in Phoenix. So with that, I have today with me Angela Duncan, who is the Deputy Director of the Development Section for the Housing Department. And we're here today to update you on our progress towards the next phase of redevelopment and transportation and transformation of our public housing units, and to request your approval to enter into a co-development agreement for the next phase of our Choice Neighborhoods grant. Before we get started, though, I'd like to give you a little background on housing and kind of ensure what our mission is, and that is to create, promote, and sustain affordable and public housing in the city of Phoenix. And we're talking about providing housing to the most vulnerable families in Phoenix. 74% of our residents in public housing make less than $20,000 a year. Without our housing, without public housing, there would be no ability for them to be able to be housed, be able to raise stable families. We also serve as a public housing authority under the U.S. Department of Health and Urban Development, which means we have responsibility to manage and administer over 3,100 public housing units. And this is an example of today what we're talking about is the next redevelopment effort for us, and this is the East AMP. That is, of course, a HUD term for Asset Management Project, and there are actually 4 communities totaling 615 units that comprise our East AMP. So there's A.L. Crone, Frank Luke, Sidney P., and A.L. Crone East. In total, 615 units, somewhere between 50 and 70 years old, each one of those particular properties. And so this is an example of what the East AMP public housing looks like. And if you can see a little bit closer, you will see, problems with cracked sidewalks. You'll see issues with windows that need replaced. You'll see that actually those have evaporative coolers on them. And so we're talking about this is the opportunity that we have today related to Choice Neighborhoods to go ahead and make a difference and to be able to transform from this to be able to have residents that have amenities, have services, and have the appropriate housing that we believe is necessary and the appropriate thing to do. And this is what we talk about as Choice Neighborhoods. And this is our opportunity. This is really our only opportunity that HUD provides a funding and grant to be able to redevelop public housing. And the choice for that is we're looking at transforming not just previously these types of grants looked only at the housing. Today we're talking about things that look at transforming neighborhoods. So they're looking at how we can improve educational outcomes, how we can get economic development within the neighborhood. So this is not just about housing, this is about transforming neighborhoods. And we're looking at trying to figure out who benefits from this. We're talking about our existing residents that are in our public housing. We're also talking about adjacent property owners, and some of the big ones across there's St. Luke's Medical Hospital. And so we're hoping with some of the expansions that'll provide great job opportunities for our residents and for the community at large. And the other focus of the Choice Neighborhoods grants are not only housing, they're people, but they're also neighborhoods and what we're looking at. And so the outreach that we have and the discussions that we've had as part of our redevelopment includes not just our residents, but neighborhoods. Each one of our public housing redevelopment efforts include outreach to communities, to the neighborhoods, to the schools in our particular neighborhoods. So that's the focus of Choice Neighborhoods. And toward that goal of transforming our housing and the neighboring community, we previously received subcommittee and city council approval to seek a co-development partner and to submit a Choice Neighborhoods grant. This was done back in March. So now I'd like to turn it over to Angela to talk to you a little bit about that process that we've gone through since the March approval.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. The Housing Department issued an RFP to select a co-developer partner on May 1st. 2 proposals were received through that process. An evaluation panel met in early June to review those proposals. The panel consisted of 2 nonprofit housing partners and 2 city staff members. Based on the 6 criteria that are listed here, the panel selected Gorman & Company as the best and most responsive proposal. Gorman & Company has over 31 years of national experience in the affordable housing industry. They have partnered with nonprofits and public housing authorities both nationally and locally, including the Housing Authority of Maricopa County. Gorman and their team have experience in the Choice Neighborhoods planning grant process and have been a part of teams that have successfully received planning grants in other states. If we are successful in receiving a planning grant, the city, the Choice Neighborhoods program will provide an opportunity for the city and Gorman to work together to engage the neighborhood and form strong partnerships to complete a comprehensive neighborhood transformation plan. The plan will address replacing outdated existing public housing, working with the school district to improve educational outcomes of the youth in the area, and also working with nonprofit and for-profit partners to provide services and to encourage reinvestment back into the community. Throughout the planning process, the city and Gorman will conduct extensive community outreach, both with residents and all of the stakeholders within that community.
And so although today we're only talking about, I call it the next phase of our planning grant, which is the first three bullets. We're talking about the release of the request for proposals, our ability to submit an application, and our ability to be able to then, if awarded, move forward with a full 2-year planning process. But I also want council to be aware of, I guess the long lead time and time frames that we're talking about to actually get through the implementation development. And that's why it's so important and so critical for us to get started today. Because if you look at that timeline, you'll see that if indeed we went down this process and if we were awarded, because once again, you have to be awarded a planning grant, you have to be awarded an implementation grant, we'd be talking somewhere around 2018 before we'd actually start development or redevelopment of this particular community. So I wanted to make sure that subcommittee was aware of that timeline and the criticality that we begin now, given the current state of our public housing. And so the staff requests that the subcommittee approve the award of Gorman as our co-development partner for the planning process and the submittal of the Choice Neighborhoods planning grant, and to expend up to $250,000 of affordable housing funding to complete these next couple of phases. With that, we're open to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you. As the councilwoman who represents the area, we have heard long and frequently from the residents that they are ready for redevelopment and they would like to be involved in planning related to this. The air conditioners and the toilets being at the top of the list of wishes. So thank you for working on this.
Could I
yes.
mention just something to kind of kick it off a little bit? And I think it's great that we keep this process moving forward. I don't think anybody wants to do that, is to delay it in any possible way. But to require city staff to, and it's been a discussion and it's been a debate that's been going on here for several years now, is getting staff, requiring staff to involve the nonprofit in the implementation and other phases of these projects, requiring that to happen. How that looks like could be done over the summertime. You can literally work with the community groups, but have your developer part, your city part, but in the city part, the staff would be required to include the nonprofit community in that, from implementation to the administrative part to all the way through, coming back to us later with how that works. So that's where I've been talking to city staff about. I've been talking to members of the nonprofit community. And it's really to find a way to start moving nonprofits into the role that the city's had for so many years as a developer, and try to get the nonprofits, let them get involved in this early on, allow them to do that, and get it to where they're partnering with the city of Phoenix. But to keep this process moving forward, but require staff to find out and come up with a plan later of how the nonprofit community is going to get involved in each aspect all the way down. That's where I'm going to be going on this, and you all know we've met on this. But it needs to happen. The nonprofit community is ready, they're willing, they're able to do this, and now it just requires the city of Phoenix just saying, let's work together and make it happen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And it's the nonprofit community, we would exclude the for-profit community?
Well, I think the nonprofit's critical for right now. I mean, we can write it however we want if we want to include the for-profit, but I would prefer to keep it in the nonprofit sector right now, because that's, if you look at the entity from the city of Phoenix, we're considered to be a nonprofit here too. But it'll be working with the city of Phoenix end of it. The city of Phoenix would still be the applicant on this, keeping it all moving forward, but we would end up working our agreement with the nonprofit community. There are 3 major levels.
Because I think we're working with the for-profit community at your request, so we're...
Well, no, it's for-profit and non, with for-profits on the developer end of it.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing that. They don't have to take it all.
Carl, could you please explain this concept, or give me, I'm not understanding it, and so I need some clarity on it as to what Councilman DeCiccio is asking.
I believe what the councilman is asking, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, is that we look at ways to engage the nonprofit community in services, and I'm not sure exactly what those service levels would be, as part of this next phase of planning and implementation. We are required as part of this particular grant and planning process to outreach and to involve communities, partners throughout, whether they're for-profit or not-profit. And for example, we went through Matthew Henson, and we have over 50 community organizations that provide support and assistance through our resident services team to be able to do outreach and to do certain things for our residents and for the community at large. So we already do that, and part of this requirement here for Choice Neighborhoods is to ensure that there is involvement and participation and support from neighborhoods and all of the affected community and stakeholders that are involved in that. So I believe we already do that as part of our normal requirement, normal
And
process.
services would be after-school programs. That's what just went to my head. But I mean, what type of services do we offer at Henson Park?
So we bring in neighborhood organizations, and Angela may be able to help also, deal with this. We bring them in there for job and resume writing.
All right.
So people like Goodwill and things like that. We bring in parent training classes. We bring in organizations that help deal with parent training, help deal with GED and GED preparation to be able to get that. We also do some resident engagement to ensure that some of our seniors, that there's programs out there to get seniors engaged through having, like walking, we have ASU interns that help us do some of those community type services for our residents currently.
And this Choice Neighborhoods is already required that we work with both,
Absolutely.
all entities
Absolutely.
in this process.
And I think that's part of this process. Once again, this will be a new one for us under Choice Neighborhoods. Previously, it was about our residents and our housing. Now this is about neighborhoods. And so it is absolutely required that we engage neighborhoods and communities as part of this planning process.
Okay, thank you.
And, Madam Chair, then you wouldn't mind me putting that in writing then? I mean, then we just make it part of the motion. That'll require you to involve the nonprofit community in the implementation, the programming part, the support services administration part. You involve them in that. So I don't think that would be a problem. Then would it, Carl, just putting that as part of the motion?
Chairwoman Gallego, Councilman DeCiccio, members of the subcommittee.
Are you going to say no, that we shouldn't do that?
No, I just want to.
You said you would.
I just want to clarify, if in fact we are successful in receiving the planning grant, we will go through a 18 to 24 month planning process where we will bring in as many stakeholders, nonprofit, for-profit partners to help us develop the transformation plan that is required as a part of the planning grant process. So I just want to clarify again, we will in fact be doing that as part of our planning process.
Well, sorry.
So is language already part of the Choice Neighborhood, is language already written in there?
Chairman Gallego, Councilwoman Pastor, yes, there is the requirement for outreach, neighborhood engagement, community stakeholders. That is a requirement for us.
Okay.
And I would say at the last meeting you held in my district on these issues, there were probably 4 nonprofits who were there. I mean, there was, I think, significant engagement.
Correct. As we've gone through that process with our current Frank Luke edition, there are in excess of 20 community partners that are actively involved in our planning of that particular development process. Mm-hmm. And the schools are very, very important to that, as well as the community organizations, because one of the things that this also does is provides a community training education center as part of our previous grant, which requires bringing community partners in there to be able to help provide services.
Wonderful.
So from my, from my end, I just think that we just put it in writing as part of the motion requiring the city to partner, to involve the nonprofit community with the support services, the implementation, the planning. So it requires that to happen. That's all I was going to add to it. It's pretty benign, I think, but it would require them to do that.
We have a card from Zach Johnson, who is with Gorman. Maybe we can take that and learn a little bit more about the partner we've been, that the process has selected. And Zach, perhaps you could speak a little bit. I think some of us are very familiar with your company, but some of the history and the values and sort of public process.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Subcommittee. Appreciate the opportunity to speak here. Gorman and Company, we're headquartered in Madison, Wisconsin. Like Angela said, we're 31 years old, if you will. We've have an office here in the Valley since 2008, and we've been one of the most successful affordable housing developers here in the Valley since that time. Sal, like you said, the nonprofit and the supportive service piece of these projects is one of the most important part of the CNI planning process and the implementation process. In order to put together a transformation plan that really addresses all the issues in the community, it's important the focus is almost more on the service piece and less on the housing piece. The housing with the tax credit program is somewhat simple in relation to what needs to be done in terms of the transformation piece and engaging all of the residents and all of the neighborhood stakeholders that will be a part and affected by the product that is the projects that are built. Do you guys have specific questions on projects that I could address, or historic partnerships we have with other housing authorities? Again, we are engaged with the Housing Authority of Maricopa County. Updating and redoing their total public housing stock currently. We're also partnered with the Rockford Housing Authority, also recapitalizing and repositioning their public housing stock as well. Both of, the Rockford Housing Authority partnership, we have engaged and participated in a CNI planning grant and implementation grant application. And like I said, I can answer any specific questions you might have on partnerships with nonprofits here in the Valley or throughout our portfolio in the country, or our previous experience on CNI planning and implementation grants.
Okay. It's my understanding, though, you are committed as a company to engagement with the community, and like I think with Maricopa County, it was some innovative partnerships with more of a focus on health than we see elsewhere.
There's no question. It is clear that these projects can't be successful without partnerships with specifically service providers and nonprofits that can, complement the housing. These projects, just providing a roof and a door doesn't answer the questions or solve the problems that a lot of these tenants and residents are facing. Residents typically need intensive services that, like Angela said, job training, financial literacy, computer training, GED classes that will allow them to be more successful community members and move up and maybe through the public housing ranks. So that is one of the most important pieces of the project's success. And with the Housing Authority of Maricopa County, they're very involved in the planning and the repositioning of all of their projects, and the plan is to provide substantial services on the projects that we complete with them here that we're closing currently, and for ongoing for 15 years and beyond, we'll be providing those services in order to provide a step up for those residents and tenants.
So, sorry.
No, please.
I hear Maricopa Housing, or Maricopa County Housing, provides those services, or you partner?
We partner with additional groups. Here in the Valley, we partnered with Save the Family in Mesa on our Escobedo project, which was a repositioning of a former public housing site. In Tempe, we partnered with Grace Community Church on Gracie's thrift store, and we built 50 units of affordable housing above the redeveloped site. And we also partnered with groups like Catholic Charities and ABLE, Arizona Bridge to Independent Living, with our Lawson McKinley project just about a mile from here. And they provide the intensive services on an ongoing basis, while the Housing Authority, for the Housing Authority of Maricopa County, will provide management and oversight on the location where those services are provided.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations on getting the recommendation from the team. We'll see if we get a recommendation from the council as well, or the subcommittee. And I guess I just making sure we're discussing the nonprofit involvement. Maybe you could help us with the financial implication of what you're proposing. Is this on the money side? What are you thinking?
Well, there's nothing to think about it right now. It's just literally just the proposal part. And let me just throw something out there that I think, everything staff has said would fall in line with that. I made another change right now. So basically, the planning grant proposal will require the City of Phoenix to partner with a nonprofit community for the planning, implementation, support services, and administration of the Choice Neighborhood Grant. everything that they said that they were planning on doing, it just puts it part of the proposal. So it requires them to do that.
But there's no money expended on that?
No, there shouldn't be any money expended on it.
So when I hear partner, maybe, when I hear partner, say Laura Pastor is going to partner with Councilwoman Kate Gallego. I have this much money and she has this much money, and we're going to bring our monies together to provide services. That's what I'm thinking as partner. Is that?
Well, again, a partnership, what you've got to do is when you work with the nonprofit community, right now, if you look at the one that was approved 2 years ago or 3 years ago, the City of Phoenix was doing the entire development part of it. It involves the nonprofit community to work with the City of Phoenix and the developer. It puts that in stone that that's what they're going to do. We've been moving in this direction. This literally just solidifies everything that you've heard them say. So whether it's money's on the table or not, you don't know that because it's just a planning stage. This requires staff to work with the nonprofit. It requires them to do that and to figure out what that partnership's going to look like and then come back to us. That's all it does.
I guess my whole thing is already, if it's in the Choice Neighborhoods grant, it's already written in there and it's required. I don't understand why we have to add another layer of requirement.
It's not another layer. It's clarifying exactly
my
what it is.
expectations is that they are going to do that.
You don't have to do this. I mean, at the end of the day, what this does is it starts moving the nonprofit community into what they should be doing. And if you don't want to do it, that's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, that is where this is at right
I don't think it's not, we don't want to do it. I think it's already happening.
And then put it in writing.
And it's going, and it's already in writing.
Then make
it's
it part of the motion.
Choice Neighborhoods grant.
Then you don't want that to be part of the motion then?
No, I'm saying it's part of the Choice Neighborhood Grant.
Right.
It's already a requirement. They have to meet the requirement in order to receive the grant.
Then put it in the motion. It's okay.
My understanding is the second place finisher in this procurement process was a nonprofit. Is that what you prefer?
Catholic charities, yeah. No, it's not about that. It's about getting the City of Phoenix requiring them to partner with the nonprofit community. It requires them to do that. And it makes them come up with a plan, work through the summer, whatever it is. It keeps the process moving forward, but it requires them to find a way to partner with it doesn't say what it does or how it's going to be done, but it forces them into meeting with the nonprofits and figuring out how that's going to work. So that's not occurring right now if you talk to the nonprofit community. What this does is it puts it in stone that they have to move that way. And that's a good movement for us to do. It literally puts in place, whether it's, I met with, I think, the Native American nonprofits last week, some of the African American community, Latino groups, and opened up that door and said, would you like to have more involvement in this? And they said, yes. What this says is it requires them to do that. And if they've come up with a better idea, why not present it to the council? If they've got a better way of delivering services, why not do that? You'll find it, and these are primarily the nonprofits that are going to operate in other, not as much in my district, but in other areas of the city. You're going to, I believe you'll end up seeing more job growth occur out of this. You're going to see the nonprofit growth occur out of this. You're going to start seeing people that have never had that opportunity before in the past have that opportunity. And I'll give you an example. I mean, if you look at a lot of the strife that's occurring across the country, I don't mean to get on a big soapbox on it. If you look at the billions of dollars across the country, everyone says, we put billions of dollars into these things. A lot of this gets taken off the top. The question is why aren't the nonprofits involved in that at the very beginning of that? They know their communities better than we do. They know their communities of what their needs are, what their wants are, the things that are going to be able to do to move them ahead. And so all this does is it starts the first step of literally turning over that power to members of their own community who are able to direct those services the best. That's what this does. It's not that complicated. I mean, even of the billions of dollars that are out there, I just don't believe a lot of it's really getting out there.
I guess I feel like...
It's a personal belief, but it's...
Yes, Chairwoman Gallego, Councilman DeCiso, members of the subcommittee. Again, if we are in fact successful in obtaining the planning grant, we will go through a 18 to 24 month planning process, which will involve as many partners as we can bring to the table to help us develop the transformation plan. So whether it be nonprofits, schools, businesses, everybody in that surrounding community will be at the table with us to assist in the development of the transformation plan. That is part of the requirements of the grant, is that you do involve the community. As Carl said, it's a little different than previous HUD grants. This is all about involving the community in the development of the plan.
That's why I have it part of my motion. It requires it, and it's written specifically to do that, to partner with the nonprofits.
But it's okay. I mean, I think it was
It
good.
should be not a problem then.
Appreciated the clarification. This wasn't diverting money. It's having meetings, involvement, getting more ideas. And
Yeah, it requires them to partner with them.
So, and Councilman, Chairwoman Guy, Councilman Cecil, the grant says applicants will need to work with the public and private agencies, organizations, including philanthropic and civic organizations and individuals to gather and leverage the financial and human capital resources needed to support the sustainability plan. These efforts should build community support for an involvement in the development and implementation of the plan. That's the requirement. When we submit as part of this planning process, it will have to talk about community engagement, resident engagement, to be able to transform neighborhoods.
And that's the step I want to add a little more of a step. It requires them. Having to talk to them doesn't necessarily involve them. The motion I have says it involves them in the process, and it requires them to do that. That's the biggest difference right there. And that should not be a bad thing for you guys to be upset about, or anyone else to be concerned about. So the motion I put together pretty much addresses that, but it puts an extra step in there that requires you to partner and work with them.
I don't think any of us are upset. I think it's adding clarity to what your motion is, and a really not clear understanding, because for me, there's clarity there. Now you're adding, we're mandating when it says it's required. So that's where I'm having difficulty, but well, that's fine.
Then you don't have a problem with this then?
I mean,
if it brings,
as long as we're clear that this is a partnership,
yeah.
Funding, there's no funding tied to this partnership. Everybody's coming together to figure this out. And that's not what I'm hearing.
What do you mean funding? What does that mean?
Well,
what are you talking about?
What I'm envisioning when it comes to funding is if there's a partnership, is it expected that the city has any type of money to give to these partners in order to provide services? That's where I'm thinking.
Well, I don't think the city would be. I would think the city would give anything. It would require the nonprofits to come in and work together as a team on it.
Then
but they become a partner.
Right, I'm fine with that. Okay. I think that happens now. That's where I'm confused. I think it already happens now. It may not happen at a higher level than what we wanted at this moment. If we're pushing for it more involvement, then I understand that.
But the city will continue to be involved in public housing and.
Well, the motion I put together is more simple than that. It just basically just says the planning grant proposal will include require the City of Phoenix to partner with the nonprofit community for the planning, implementation, support services, and administration of the Choice Neighborhood Grant. Simple.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilman.
Okay. Thank you. It sounds, well, I'm supportive of staff recommendation. It sounds like it already is in writing. It sounds like the efforts are there. You know, you pointed out that the second place, or the second place finisher was a nonprofit. That is a strong indication that it's already in writing and that the efforts are there. We should continue to move in that direction. We can do that regardless, or we should be doing that regardless. I'm supportive of staff recommendation. I think it is a great message, but it's a message that has already been heard and that staff is already acting on. And I think we're moving in the right direction, and I'm supportive of staff recommendation.
Wonderful, thank you.
Chairwoman Gallego, members of the subcommittee, I just want to clarify that we need to partner beyond the nonprofit community because there are other partners as part of this submittal that we need to partner with. So I don't want to stipulate it just to partnering with nonprofits because we also have to bring, as I said, education to the table, businesses, faith-based communities. So I don't want it to stipulate that we're only partnering with nonprofits. If we could just clarify.
But nonprofit and profit community.
And then the residents are at the top of my personal list. So I joined Councilman Valenzuela in being comfortable with the staff recommendation as well.
So nobody wants to put in writing what we say we're going to do.
It is.
I believe
that's why I'm saying, just, why not just add part of it then? I mean, this is the government gobbledygook that you get. If you don't want to do something, this is what you end up doing. And you end up blurring it. This brings the clarity to it. Having staff say it doesn't necessarily make it so. This puts it in the motion. What this does, and I'm going to tell you right, this is the real bothersome part for me. You've got individuals in this community that literally can step up and pull it together, make it work, but individuals like to get in their way. And because for whatever multiple reasons that they want to do that. So at the end of the day, you're either going to be working with the nonprofits or you're not. If you're not even willing to put it in writing, then that tells me that there's going to be enough leeway for staff to get out of it. I think the motion I put together was really simple. It puts the requirement in there. It says that they have to do this. They have to work with the nonprofit. If you want to put profit, put it in there. But it requires them to be a partner with the city of Phoenix on this thing.
Madam Chair.
But
yes,
then don't
Councilman Valenzuela.
I think it's unfair to ignore the fact that this is already in writing, to ignore the fact that the second place finisher was a nonprofit, to ignore the fact that efforts have already been made and continue to be made. I think it's important to just recognize those things. How else can it be explained that the second place finisher was a nonprofit? And in full transparency, I think the entire story should be told here. And so I believe that, again, this is already in writing. I commend staff and the nonprofits and everyone for coming to the table on this. And, do we need to get better? Absolutely. We have to get better in all of our processes. But we're moving in the right direction, and this is, again, something that I'm supportive of, speaking of staff recommendation.
Wonderful. Is that a motion? Or do we have a motion on the...
Do we have a motion on the table?
I have a motion.
Okay.
I put my motion out there.
Is there a second?
I do not hear a second.
In your motion, can we add this language that's already written?
As long as you have, sorry, go ahead.
Applicants will need to work with public and private agencies, organizations, including philanthropic and civic organizations, and individuals to gather and leverage the financial and human capital resources needed to support the sustainability of the plan.
If we can add just 2 words in there, required to partner with.
Could you give us a real example of something that might come out of that?
Well,
that was
yeah,
missing?
Well, let's take, for example, when it comes to the support services. We have a great support services, but there might be another entity out there, a nonprofit, that could do part of the support services better than us. They could do that. Or even when it comes down to the implementation part. If you look at Matthew Henson, that's where you had a developer team up with a nonprofit, and it worked. Mm-hmm. It's the model we're looking at here is something that we looked at back in the 1990s that we implemented, and then staff just came by and changed it again around the early 2000s. So it really goes back to the way it was. It was meant to literally to require staff to work with the nonprofit community. It's really going back to the way it used to be. And to look at different alternatives out there, to partner with the nonprofit community. And if you want to look at other community groups, I like the language that she had, but if you just put the words to partner with, that'll work. Now, how that partnership works, it's up to staff to figure out with the nonprofit community who does what best. They can come back to us later. Why prevent us
Like
from
we are
opening that?
already, we have several nonprofits in this room who provide services to our public housing population with great success, including job-related skills that are vital to individuals.
But why not put that like that then? I mean, I don't understand the pushback on it, quite frankly. I mean, by just changing a couple of the words, it totally changes the way we're going to be looking at this in the future without setting in stone what it is. Let staff work out what that's going to be, knowing that this could be something good for some of the nonprofit communities that are out there. 2 words.
It's semantics to me, really.
Then let's put it in
It's
there.
semantics. So if you want to put applicants will require / need to work, I'm fine. To me, it's all
What's that mean? Tell me it again.
Kind of like when we go / and or whatever. If you want to put required, applicants will
Partner.
Require and need to work.
To partner.
To partner.
That's fine. I think it's a good compromise.
Okay, now
So
what's the
we
motion?
have a motion and a second.
Yes.
I don't know, the motion, oh, wait, okay, what's the motion?
Wait, just what you read. Please just read it again.
Applicants will partner,
Would be required to partner.
will be. Okay.
All right, so Councilwoman Pastor has a motion on the table, and
Yeah,
you've second?
fine.
Okay,
Okay.
wonderful. Any further, or any staff comfortable? Any discussion?
Yeah, just point of clarification. What is the motion? And I know it's Councilman DeCicio's motion. And do we have a second?
Well, the motion is applicants will be required to partner with public and private agencies, organizations, and individuals to gather and leverage the financial and human capital resources needed to support the sustainability of the plan.
And that's Councilman DeCicio's motion?
No.
No.
It was my motion.
It's a hybrid.
It's
took
a
out some of
hybrid
the stuff.
motion.
Right. Okay, and both my question, but we have a motion and a second on the table, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Since we have a motion and a second, and again,
Staff
I
is
still feel
comfortable
the
with the
command-
motion on the table, so.
I still feel that that has been moving in the right direction, and these things are already in writing. But there's a consensus that's building, and there's a motion and a second. I'll support that.
Okay. And I apologize, we did have a maybe card. Did you want to speak? Councilman Craig Tripkin is here, and I apologize.
Wow, somebody tall was ahead of me.
Yeah.
Happens to me all the time.
Well, 5 years ago, you were a little taller.
Yeah, right. I'd like to globalize this a little bit, and I'll try to be within my time frame if I can. I'm representing both Central Arizona Shelter Services and our housing affiliate, which is Arizona Housing Inc. We have over 500. We have 500 plus permanent supportive housing units. Those are housing units that are for generally formerly homeless people, in which we provide intense services to that community, those communities. And those are scattered throughout Phoenix in 5 different projects. This motion, or this what's in front of you, is really 2 things, and I think this is part of the confusion. It's a planning grant at $250,000, but in the motion or in the staff report is also something which says, upon completion of the neighborhood transformation plan, staff will provide an update to the NHD committee and seek authorization to apply for the CN implementation grant in partnership with Gorman to implement the transformation plan. That's where the actual moving of dirt part starts. Now, this is $250,000 today. If you look at what the HUD grant, if you look at what the implementation grants are, typically, you're talking tens of millions of dollars. Okay, so you're you are approving the idea that this will be a tens of millions of dollars long-term process. And you're approving Gorman for that, which is fine. I don't have an issue with that. But I do think that that's where the partnership with nonprofits really starts to become important in terms of building that housing. I will tell you, for example, we heard gentleman from Gorman, excuse me, I'm kind of anxious, talk about tax deals for affordable housing. Well, tax deals don't work for tax deals don't work for us, or they don't work very well. They don't tax deals and housing first as a homeless housing policy generally don't work. We had 220 people in the last 15 months at CAS who are from the zip code that this immediate area is in. So I want to make sure that, and this is where the nonprofit part comes in, that we globalize the concept of nonprofits, because CAS is in fact involved with this, because if we gentrify this neighborhood, and a tax deal will gentrify whatever units are displaced, and I know there's relocation monies and that sort of thing, there will be issues that will be faced, and I just want to try to, if I can, sort of globalize the notion of who is relevant to this, because this is relevant to CAS. This is relevant to Arizona Housing, Inc. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Transparency, I would like to make sure that nonprofits that are involved with developing housing are also involved in the, not just the planning, but in the implementation phase of this. Because like I say, this is a two-step process. This isn't just $250,000 here. They're going to be coming back and they're going to be asking you for a significantly greater amount of money at some point, or at least authorization to look for more money. So I just wanted to, I guess, talk briefly about the concept of nonprofits and the fact that CPLC and others that may not be directly involved with that community, that specific community, are in fact involved with developing housing throughout the city and should be at the table.
Well, this requires it to be part of that.
I just
and
wanted,
support services.
and I wanted to bookmark all the nonprofit and for-profit, for that matter, but all the nonprofit groups that are in fact developing affordable housing. And I did want to also add that tax deals are not the solution to at least addressing a significant part of the very low income communities' needs, housing needs. Any questions? Thank you.
Yeah. Reed Butler.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll fill out a card in a second. I want to clarify something Craig said, if I may. My understanding today's vote is about the $250,000 grant. It's really not about the implementation grant.
Implementation too.
Well, that is not what I thought. That's, again, what I'd like to clarify. In 2004, when we worked on Matthew Henson, and we partnered with the Urban League back then, and Chicanos por la Causa, and McCormick Baron Salazar, there was a whole process to go through for the actual larger grant, which I guess you would call the implementation grant today. So I'd like to clarify that what's being voted on today is this planning grant, and that the actual implementation will have a whole nother procurement process, and the private sector, for-profit, nonprofit, will be allowed to compete in that process. Thank you.
Well, my understanding as part of the motion was that it included all across the board.
Madam Chairman, the staff report does say that we will come back to you with Gorman and Company for the larger grant in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Chairman, members of the subcommittee, that is correct. When we issued the RFP was a co-developer for the entire process that we potentially go through. It's important to have that partnership on board from the very beginning, through planning, through development, through the implementation grant, through development, and the ongoing requirements for that construction and redevelopment.
You mean Gorman?
In this case, anybody could have bid on this entire process, but yes, assuming that we continue to go down this process, they continue to perform as expected, that we continue to look at this, that indeed they would be awarded that contract.
However, I do need to clarify something. So at the point, if we're successful in receiving the planning grant, we go through the 18 to 24 month process, and we complete that process, and then we prepare the implementation grant. We did stipulate, Housing Department did stipulate that the implementation grant would come back to subcommittee for review and approval. So that particular phase of it will come back to subcommittee. Today is about bringing on the co-developer through the process and utilizing $250,000 as leverage in the planning grant, and also to work with Gorman initially to help us prepare the grant for the planning phase.
But in the motion too, no, we didn't say that in the planning phase. In the motion, we said that the City of Phoenix is going to partner with these groups throughout. We didn't say the planning phase. So if that's changing, I need to know right now. This is for, the RFP was Gorman through the entire process. That likewise, the partnering with the nonprofit was going to be throughout the entire process as well. Is that what you understood? Is that, okay, that's correct. Okay. I want to make sure we're clear on that. So if I could try to
clarify, Councilman and Chair. So normally, when you're going for the larger dollars, as Councilman Tripkin mentioned, the tens of millions of dollars, there's a more robust procurement process that would take place then, and there will be national and local, nonprofit and for-profit. You really, to me, at that point, want all the competition possible, because that's how you'll get the best result for the residents, which I think the chair has mentioned repeatedly, and for the city. So from the industry perspective, we would hope that process is yet to come.
Okay, I think we have a motion on the table. And I think because we have 6 agenda items still to go, I am totally destroying my record of ending early. There's no chance of that happening. Yes.
Just to bring clarity, I just want to make sure, because, I will ask this 1,000 times until I hear exactly what it is. The nonprofit community will be partnering with the City of Phoenix, according to the motion, throughout the entire process through this, whether it's the implementation, the support services, administrative, all that, and staff will figure out how that's going to work. Is that correct?
Well, I'm going to read the motion once again. Applicants will be required to partner with public and private agencies, organizations, and individuals to gather and leverage the financial and human capital resources needed to support the sustainability of the plan.
But
it incorporates everybody.
But it incorporates also the implementation, the support services, administrative, right?
These efforts should build community support for and involvement in the development and implementation of the plan.
So you're just talking about one segment of it. We're not going to include them in anything else?
Well, public meeting notice was on the plan today. So if we were going to outsource public housing, we need to notice that.
It's not about outsourcing it to the nonprofit community. It's literally about involving them in there and having staff come back to us. That's where I'm at on this. If it's just for the plan, I'm going to vote no on this. If it's something that's going to require staff to work through the summer, come back to us, and how they're going to implement this and bring in the nonprofit throughout the entire part of it, I'll be fine.
Well,
what I don't want to do is wordsmith it where the public doesn't understand it.
Well, I'm reading exactly what's out of the grant. So these efforts should build community support for and involvement in the development and implementation of the plan.
Okay.
So it's both.
So it's just one implementation.
Development and implementation of the plan.
The implementation of the plan is one thing, but implementation of the project is a whole different thing.
Okay. I'm getting all.
No, I know, but when it says the implementation of the plan.
I am just sticking with what's in this.
So let me just clarify again, if I may, and staff correct me if I'm wrong. When you develop the transformation plan, it's going to talk about the entire project. So it will talk about the entire project that we're going to be walking through from the beginning to the end. There are different phases that are funded, but the plan is encompassing the entire plan with the community partners, schools, as I said before, to develop the transformation of that neighborhood.
But that's
what the plan will incorporate.
But in the plan, you've got to be able to address the implementation part, the support services, administrative parts. That's where the partnership would be required.
These efforts should These efforts should build community support for and involvement in the development and implementation of the plan, meaning the transformation plan.
Okay, but again, I understand believe it or not, I do get what they're saying there. It's just not saying exactly what I'm hearing from here. I'm hearing staff say it's okay to do that, but what it's going to do, it's in the plan, it's going to require the partnership.
Right. That's the motion. The motion.
Nonprofit and all the other communities.
The motion is
Right.
the applicant
Okay.
will be required to partner, meaning the city of Phoenix will be required to partner.
Okay.
Okay.
With the implementation,
It's
support
there.
services.
It's
Okay.
development and
In the
implementation.
plan. That's an important part. Okay.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. And congratulations, Carl. We look forward to working with you in your next role, and maybe you can fill out a card and tell us. Yes. And now we will come back to customer service improvements. I am very personally committed to customer service improvements, so excellent.
Thank you, Madam Chair and member of the subcommittee. We'll get started and be brief here. This is just some customer service improvements related to our customer service counter within the Planning and Development Department. This counter serves between 400 and 500 people a day.
And I think that everyone had a chance to review the packet, so maybe we will go straight into a motion. Is
Certainly.
that, would you mind?
Yeah, not at
We
all.
are very
We're
much
happy.
appreciative. We are grateful that people will have ADA accessible and better process, and we know people, this is jobs you're creating, so thank you for your work on this.
Thank
Do we
you.
have a motion?
I move staff's recommendations. I move staff's recommendations.
Second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Wonderful. Passes 3-0. Many apologies. We thank you for your work and apologize, but you earned your keep earlier today.
Thank you.
And we have a very active Graffiti Free Phoenix effort. We could invite, I guess we have a quorum issue, so we do? Okay. Okay. Then we'll do a brief graffiti update and let everyone know that we're working very actively with very not brief meetings, but working very hard on this. And thank you to Councilman Nowakowski for co-chairing the Graffiti Free Task Force.
Absolutely. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. We are here to provide an update on the Graffiti Free Phoenix efforts that have been underway over the past year. As co-chair of that subcommittee, I want to thank you for your support over the years. I'm Chris Hallett, the Director of the Neighborhood Services Department. I have with me today our newest hire in Neighborhood Services, Linda Dodge. She's a Deputy Director over our Neighborhood Engagement Division, and as such will be responsible for a large part of the implementation of the plan that we're presenting to you today. But first, I want to wish the City of Phoenix a happy anniversary. This summer marks the 25th year that the Graffiti Busters program has been in existence. You can see how it's been operating over the years. We have some historical pictures there. It started out as a 3-person group back in 1990, and 2 of those 3 people are still working in the program today out in the field removing graffiti. We have 2 others on the team from the vintage picture on the lower left there that are still operating and serving the community in our department very well. This program has received national and international. In fact, we have a visitor, an elected official from Australia in town this week. We provided them a tour and some technology enhancements yesterday. The same individual was here about 10 years ago because they feel very passionately, as our residents do here, and a low tolerance for graffiti in their community. So they see us in high regards, and they're sharing what they're doing and learning from us what we're doing. So I also want to thank the task force. They've been meeting since March of 2011, and they put together a plan before, and we have today another adopted plan that they're putting forth for the next fiscal year. We've had a lot of robust meetings over the last 12 months. They've been meeting every other month. We've had great partnerships both within interdepartmental departments as well as interagencies. We've had Maricopa County attend, the state attend, and we've had great training and education, both the task force and the interagencies, and what everybody's doing. The picture on the lower right highlights one of the endeavors the task force took on, which was Graffiti Free Awareness Month this last February, as the mayor proclaimed it Graffiti Free Awareness Month. And everybody had their hearts out from the task force, and social media and outreach heightened the awareness that month, raised the level of activity in the community as well as complaints received. The task force, again, is chaired by you and co-chaired by Councilman Nowakowski, have put forth and adopted a annual renewable education plan for the year coming up this fiscal year. And they coined the overarching goal for the plan itself and the task force as coined by the members of the task force is to have a graffiti-free Phoenix. And in that effort, we're going to have goals and outcomes in enforcement, education, and abatement that will provide goals, desired outcomes, and actions in each of these key areas. In enforcement, we want to encourage and increase the general collaboration amongst our partner departments. As I said, this year highlighted a lot of interdepartmental cooperation of departments. There was a high emphasis of the task force that other departments in the city, not just the citizens out there calling in graffiti. We have endeavors in this plan to be able to increase the enforcement efforts. We work closely with the police department, the graffiti detective squad, as well as our prosecution. And we bridged over to the county as far as what they can do from an enforcement model legislation, et cetera, that we're going to be working on in this year's plan. Education is a big component of this. We want to increase the awareness of Graffiti-Free Phoenix. We're going to have another Graffiti-Free Awareness Month in February. We're also going to have a summit, a neighborhood summit late this fall, early winter. It's going to focus on neighborhood things, but have a heavy focus on graffiti itself. So we're going to bring in all our stakeholders and partners across the agencies and the residents and have a good effort as to what we can be doing from an education outreach. We have a very robust education outreach plan that we're putting into play, and we look to have the key results of that. In the abatement area, again, we work one overall reduction in graffiti, so we'll be working with technology enhancements and all the partners there, enhancing our Blight Buster volunteer program to have better outcomes, and we're going to be developing metrics and data that we'll be able to share with the subcommittee, the agencies, and as we put forth this plan for next year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And welcome, Linda. We already kept her working late last night, so thank you for your commitment to community and appreciate your work.
Thank you.
And now a real treat, Cities of Service Love Your Block Action Report. I think we may not have time to complete the PowerPoint presentation, but we have some exciting introductions.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we are pleased to be here. We'll keep this very brief. I'm Michael Hammett with the Citywide Volunteer Program, and I'm very pleased to have our two new AmeriCorps Vista members for our Cities of Service Love Your Block initiative. And we have here beside me is Helen Stoddard and also Haley Steele.
Welcome. We are very lucky to have you.
And they started just yesterday was their first day, and they will be here for 1 year. Our grant does allow for 2 AmeriCorps Vistas for 3 years. So we're very excited. And this is for neighborhood revitalization.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us here.
Sure, and I just wanted to add that Haley is an alumni of the council office, so we can welcome her back. Nice to see you, Haley.
Welcome back.
We have 8 districts.
Yes.
There's only 2.
These two folks here from Cities of Service will be actually implementing the Love Your Block initiative, and that does touch a pilot program area which incorporates every council member of this subcommittee plus 7.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Inclusive.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being able to serve our city and our country through AmeriCorps. We are very excited to have you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We are out in the theme today, out in the community. Future agenda items.
Chairwoman, there should be a list in front of you for the next meeting back in September. Are there any additional items you'd like to add?
And we did get some interest from the community in revisiting donation containers.
Okay. Oh, yes.
With that, we have a call to the public. I do not see any additional cards, so we are adjourned.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.